Our top story, the release of the Defence Strategic Review. Joining me is Malcolm Davis. He's a senior analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Malcolm, thanks for your time. What's your overall assessment of this being described as the most significant review in 4 decades?
Look, I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's not a complete solution. We're going to need to probably update this in coming years as the threat environment changes. This is heading us in the right direction now in terms of a focused force rather than a balanced force, which means we're responding more effectively to the sort of challenges that China in particular is presenting to us. But we do need to probably go further, particularly in terms of impactful projection. The systems that we're getting with the National Defence Review, which you have there, are much longer range than what we've had in the past, but they're not long range enough.
There's also a move from, these intermittent reports, white papers, reviews, to an ongoing, every 2 years, national defence strategy. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It allows us to keep up with developments, strategic developments, but also technology developments. And technology is moving incredibly fast. One of the key things that needs to be emphasised more, I think, is Pillar 2 of AUKUS, which is the high technology area. That needs to really be fast-tracked. And having that biannual national strategic review allows us to take stock of where technologies are headed and prioritise certain areas such as hypersonics or space capabilities or autonomous systems that are needed more to prepare for potential contingencies in the future.
Parts of the report, including around the long-range missiles, there's still some detail to be fleshed out. What sort of information will you be looking for?
I'll be looking firstly for how we're going to cover the cost of these. What we are doing in a way is cutting back in other areas to pay for these long-range systems. So we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, shall we say. That can be a dangerous move because it ultimately leaves other areas of the Defence Force under-equipped and underfunded. But at the same time, we need to recognise that there could be adverse economic circumstances more globally that could slow down our ability to keep funding these priority areas such as impactful projection. So what I'll be wanting to see is what is the government's contingency plans if economic headwinds build up to the point whereby we do need to invest more in defence. And I think we cannot go down the path of assuming that defence can just kind of drift along and around about where it is in terms of percentage of GDP funding.
It sounds like it's going to grow substantially from that. In terms of some of the sacrifices made or the retargeting from a balanced defence force to a sharpened and targeted one, is the reduction in the number of tanks or those armoured vehicles down to 129 from upwards of 400 vehicles that had been previously ordered. Do you think that diminishes the army?
I think it reduces their capabilities in one critical mission area, which is if worse comes to worse, we do have to do close combat battle, then we don't have the means really to do it beyond a very limited way as part of a coalition force. The key point I would make here is if we are facing the prospect of war with China in the second half of this decade over a Taiwan contingency, and I note that Taiwan is not mentioned once in that report, then what we need to do is far more than what the Defence Strategic Review suggests. We need to be investing much more in defence. We need to be acquiring capabilities much more quickly and much more expansively to be able to project power in a long way away from Australia, much further than the sort of ranges we're talking about now with systems like PRISM or HIMARS or LRASM and so forth that the review is talking about. We need to be projecting power way beyond that archipelago to our north into the South China Sea. And so far, I'm not seeing evidence that we're doing that.
When you say that Taiwan's not mentioned, this is the unclassified version.
Of course.
Obviously, in the classified version, we're talking about very specific scenarios that would have been detailed.
Indeed. But I think everyone understands out in the open source world that it's Taiwan that everyone is focused on. So I think they could have actually mentioned Taiwan in context. They talked about the South China Sea, for example. So I think it would have been appropriate to at least have a paragraph or two talking about Taiwan in the unclassified version.
When we talk about bolstering the bases in the north and seeking to deny any potential adversary their efforts to project power against Australia, basically to attack Australia through our north, this makes a lot of sense. Why would this not have been a focus of our military in years gone by, certainly in the last decade?
Inertia, bureaucratic inertia, essentially. It's very difficult for large organisations to shift gears and do something new. And I think that what you've seen with the defence organisation in past decades is a unwillingness to recognise the growing threat that is confronting us, particularly in the last 10 years, and shift gears intellectually and conceptually and operationally so that we are better positioned and postured to be able to respond to the threats. This starts to do that. But as I said, it's a step in the right direction, but it's not the complete solution yet.
The response to national crises, things like natural disasters, emergencies, the floods and so on, they're suggesting that the ADF would be the last call, only in extreme circumstances. Does this fit with your thinking of the role of the ADF, or should they be willing and capable to do more?
No, I think it is the right move because the worst thing we could do would be to wear out the ADF's operational ability for its primary purpose, which is to fight and win wars by getting them diverted onto these other tasks. We certainly do need some sort of approach to national security that covers climate change and natural disasters. We need some sort of organisation and force that can do that. But I think relying too much on the ADF just erodes their ability to do their primary function, which is to fight and win wars.
Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Great to see you. Thanks for your insights.
Thank you very much.